you ever wondered what happens when you send 100 shot of nitrous through a 2-liter turbo engine that wasn't built for it? Well, it's this. After blowing up the Jetta with what was a ridiculous amount of nitrous, it's time to push it back to the shop, get it up in the air, and see what kind of damage we're looking at. First up, we're gonna drain the engine oil and pull the oil pan. And at the bottom of the oil pan, we have a ton of debris. This gives us access to our balance shaft module, which is also completely destroyed. This balance shaft module not only has balance shafts, but it also has our oil pump in it. It's so crazy how much carnage we have at the bottom of this engine. So that balance shaft and the connecting rod, all terrible damage, but I want to get the cylinder head off so we can get a little bit better look from the top down. Luckily, this setup is pretty easy to remove. Well, there's no metal blasted through the top side. That's good. We got to get this high pressure fuel pump off and our nitrous line here. This was a freshly rebuilt high pressure fuel pump too, so hopefully we can salvage this guy. There we go. Get our manifold out of the way almost. Come off, there you go. Now what's cool about this engine is we can actually get the timing belt off without taking off this engine mount right here. It's not ideal, and like if you're putting a timing belt on it, it doesn't matter. You have to take the mount off anyway, but this makes detensioning and removing the belt super easy. So once tension's off, we can just pull our belt off. And it doesn't matter where the belt is because, well, this one's not going back on anyway. We do need to get a couple of screws out for the lower cover though. There's one back here and one up here in the front. Check it out. This is the cover that goes over the passenger side axle. The block is still attached to it. The sealant is still on the block, but this chunk of the block was just hanging out. Pretty wild. Look at that. Now we can undo our head bolts, which it just so happened to work out that our cams were kind of in the right place to access our bolts. So that's cool. And we don't have to take that cam girdle off. Nothing like pulling apart an engine that altogether had maybe an hour of runtime on it. Okay, everything's loose. Now it's time to get the cylinder head out of the way and see just how bad this damage really is. All right, let's get a better look at this engine block. Oh man, chunks. I'm pretty sure that right down there is part of the piston, the rest of the piston, I should say. It looks like the other cylinders are actually okay. There's a little bit of metal in cylinder 4, a little bit in 3, 2, well, I think we know what happened at 2, and a little bit in 1. I mean, I definitely wouldn't want to have that metal in there at all, but it's not horrible. Oh, there's sharp pieces in there. Well, here is the rest of cylinder 2 piston. Boy, oh boy, did that thing come apart. You actually kind of made it together. There's still a pretty big chunk missing. There's also a lot of connecting rod missing. Now we can at least rotate our engine around. I don't know if I'm going to even be able to get connecting rod number 2 out. All right, so we still have some more stuff we got to get out of the way before we can get all of our connecting rods out. Bits of our balance shaft module, bits of completely crooked bolt, chunks of chunks hanging off of other chunks, another curved bolt for those hard to reach places. Next, let's go ahead and take off our connecting rod end caps so that we can remove our pistons. Cylinder 1, cylinder 3, and cylinder 4 all came out no problem. I was able to get the proper tooling on it to take the caps off. And the bearings look pretty decent. Now for that floppity end, for our cylinder 2 connecting rod, I ended up having to cut it off. There we go. Hopefully. Oh, all right. Well, that was worse than I expected, but here we go. Here's our thing. And of course, we have to take a look at our remaining intact pistons. They actually look pretty good, except for this one piece of embedded metal. And shockingly, the bearings look pretty good too. It's crazy how there's this trail of destruction right at cylinder number 2. After that piston came apart, clearly it punched a hole in the front of the block, in the oil pan, as well as the back of the block, and of course, completely obliterated that balance shaft module. I've seen numerous engines with holes in the block where the connecting rod broke and came out of the engine. However, I've never seen one punch through the front and the back. Moving on to our cylinder head, it's about the damage that we would expect to see. Cylinder 2 is the one that suffered the majority of the damage. You can see our spark plug is just absolutely destroyed. All around the edge, looks like it got beat up pretty good with some metal. Now, whether the valves are bent or not, I'm not really sure. I just left the camshaft in because well, there was no point in taking it out. It kind of stinks because we just put all this work into the cylinder head. However, a new cylinder head is in order. You might be able to fix that damage or even run it as is. However, it's just not worth running the risk. Well, here is our catastrophic damage. So all this pile of parts over here, this is mostly balance shaft module. I mean, you can see just how destroyed these parts are. So my assumption is what happened is that cylinder 2 connecting rod let go. That's what destroyed all of this. That obviously is what got sent through the block. These are kind of the only truly identifiable pieces. There's a couple pieces of piston floating around here. That might be connecting rod. It's probably not a jigsaw puzzle worth putting back together, but check out what happens. Some bent bolts. This is always really, really neat. Now, the reason that I think this failed beyond like shoving way more nitrous into an engine than you should, especially with stock internals, is that the connecting rods are actually the weak point. So if we look really carefully, you can actually see inside of here, these connecting rods are hollow. So all that stress, that downward stress, just said, you can see it bent it like this and then sent it out the block. Oddly enough, though, I mean, you know, not that I'd reuse any of this stuff, but the rest of the engine, minus this nonsense, is pretty decent. So we must have just been at the right place at the wrong time for cylinder 2, and she said kablooey. A new engine is in order. That hole in the block is amazing. It's pretty much the trail of where our connecting rod for cylinder 2 goes through. We have chunks of block, more engine stuff. Luckily, there's not too much metal that got pushed through the rest of the system because it all just puked out of the bottom. We'll need a new turbo oil return line. You can see it hit it so hard it just completely collapsed this line. Lesson learned, don't go full send with 100 shot of nitrous without forged internals on your BPY, otherwise this is what will happen. My next plan for the Jetta is to actually get the nitrous to work without blowing up the engine. I mean, it technically did work. So what I'm gonna do is I'm probably gonna spend a little bit more money on getting the nitrous to function properly. This means getting a progressive nitrous controller, probably a nitrous purge kit, and maybe a couple of other little things. That way we can smoothly deliver our nitrous rather than just injecting it like a bomb all at one time. After we get it working properly, we'll probably take it back to the dyno and make sure there's no more tweaks or anything like that that we can do to make sure that it's functioning properly. Then, in a perfect world anyway, we take that Jetta back to the drag strip and see what it'll run. We have so much time and energy and effort into this car. I really, really want to see what it'll do on the drag strip. And we also have a backup engine just in case we blow up another BPY. And after that, most likely, this car will be for sale. With that, I'm out. Have an awesome day. And I'll talk to you again next time. Look at just how awesome this is. I need to make a trophy out of this.